smashed. This car is disqualified.
The engine is...
Saturday mornings used to feel different. There was something in the air, a kind of electricity, when you dropped in front of the television set and that theme song came crashing through the speakers. If you were a kid in the late 1960s or early 1970s, you know exactly what comes next. That white car, those buttons, that mysterious masked driver, and a family held together by racing, loyalty, and a secret nobody was supposed to know. This is the entire story of Speed Racer, 1967, where it all began. The origin of the show. Before Speed Racer was a household name in America, it was something else entirely on the other side of the world. The story begins with a manga artist named Tatsuo Yoshida, who had been drawing racing comics in Japan since the early 1960s. His earlier series, Pilot Ace, followed a young man with a dream of speed and adventure. When the animation studio Tatsunoko Productions was looking for its next project after Space Ace, their debut series from 1965, they turned to Yoshida's work for inspiration. Yoshida had gotten his original idea from two American films that were enormously popular in Japan at the time, Viva Las Vegas and Goldfinger. He took Elvis Presley's dashing, neckerchief-wearing race car driver image and combined it with James Bond's legendary gadget-filled Aston Martin DB5, and from that collision of ideas, a character was born. His name was Go Mifune, a young man with a black pompadour, a red bandana, and an ambition that nothing could slow down. The manga version of Mach Go Go Go, as it was titled in Japan, began serialization in Shonen Book magazine in 1966. Tatsunoko Productions began production on the anime simultaneously, with director Hiroshi Sasagawa overseeing the series. The first episode aired on Fuji Television on April 2nd, 1967. It ran for 52 episodes, concluding in March 1968. The creators made a deliberate choice from the very beginning. They gave the show a stateless visual setting. Although the Mifune family clearly lived in Japan, Japanese school uniforms and other distinctly local cultural markers were intentionally removed. The look was more Western than Eastern, a conscious decision because Tatsunoko Productions had international ambitions from day one. They wanted the show to travel, and travel it did. The English language rights were quickly acquired by the American syndicator Translux. Producer Peter Fernandez took charge of the entire Americanization effort, writing and directing the English dialogue, adapting the story for an American audience, and providing the voices for many of the characters himself. Most notably, he voiced both Speed Racer and Racer X. The show was rechristened Speed Racer, Go Mifune became Go Mifune, and then simply Speed Racer. And the series premiered in American syndication in the summer of 1967, just months after the Japanese original began airing. It was one of the earliest Japanese animated series ever localized for American television, following only Astro Boy and Kimba the White Lion.
That wasn't very smart of Chim Chim to steal that bird's egg. Now I hope we can rescue him. Chim Chim!
The world and its characters. The world of Speed Racer is built around a single family and the sport that defines them. At the center of everything is Speed himself. 18 years old, passionate, impulsive, and gifted behind the wheel in a way that seems almost supernatural. He wears a blue shirt with a yellow G on the front, the initial standing for his original Japanese name, Go, a white collar, and his trademark red racing bandana. He has the kind of confidence that young men carry when they are still too young to understand how dangerous the world actually is, but enough skill to survive it anyway. His father is Pops Racer, whose full name in the original Japanese is Daisuke Mifune. Pops is a former wrestler who walked away from a corporate automobile manufacturing job to found his own company, Mifune Motors, and pour every ounce of his skill and obsession into building the ultimate racing car. He is hot-tempered, protective, and deeply proud, sometimes to a fault. He loves his family fiercely, and his relationship with Speed is the emotional engine of the whole series. Pops built the Mach 5. He knows every bolt and wire in that car. And in some ways, the Mach 5 is the physical expression of everything Pops is. Powerful, ingenious, capable of far more than it looks. Speed's girlfriend is Trixie, Michi Shimura in the Japanese version. Her character name inspired by actor Takashi Shimura, who had famously collaborated with Toshiro Mifune in multiple films. Trixie is sharp, capable, and not content to wait on the sidelines. She flies her own helicopter, shows up at races uninvited when she senses Speed is in trouble, and on more occasions than the show probably intended, is the one who provides the critical help that gets Speed out of danger.
Fire! They're burning the village!
Then there's Sparky, Speed's best friend and the lead mechanic at Mifune Motors. He knows the Mach 5 as well as anyone except Pops. When the car needs an emergency repair in the middle of a race, on a cliff face, in the dark, Sparky is the one who finds a way. Speed's little brother is Spritle, Kurio Mifune in Japanese, a sugar-obsessed, irrepressible kid who regularly causes chaos by sneaking into the trunk of the Mach 5 with his pet chimpanzee, Chim Chim. The two of them dress in matching striped outfits, move in perfect comic unison, and have a habit of stumbling into situations that they absolutely should not be in. They are the show's comic relief, but the writers were smart enough to occasionally make them useful. Their mischief has a way of accidentally tipping the scales at just the right moment. And then there is Racer X, the masked racer, driver of car number 9, the shooting star. A man whose identity and motives are unknown to almost everyone in the world of the show, and who appears again and again to complicate a race, stop a villain, or save Speed's life while making sure Speed doesn't know he's been saved. His car is yellow. His mask is white. His voice is controlled, measured, and carries a weight that nobody in the story can quite account for. The audience learns it very early. Racer X is Rex Racer, Speed's older brother, who left home years before the series began and has never come back. But Speed doesn't know, Pops doesn't know, and Racer X intends to keep it that way.
Maybe I can do something with that tree.
The Mach 5, the car that changed everything. No story about Speed Racer makes any sense without spending time on the Mach 5. Pops built it. Designed by Mitsuki Nakamura, Tatsunoko's art director, the car's sleek white body was drawn with reference to real European race cars of the 1960s. Porsches, Ferraris, and Jaguars were among the inspirations. The large red M on the hood stood for Mifune Motors, though American audiences for decades assumed it stood for Mach 5. Either reading works. The car is as much a character as the people who drive it. What made the Mach 5 genuinely unlike anything else in animation at the time was its set of 7 special devices, each activated by a lettered button on the steering wheel hub. 7 buttons, A through G, and a separate H button on the center console. In the early episodes, the narrator walks through each one in a way that made every kid watching want desperately to memorize them. Button A raises 4 powerful jacks from the car's body, hydraulic lifts that can boost the Mach 5 over obstacles or raise it clear off the ground in an emergency. Button B deploys belt tires, special grip treads that can handle any terrain from ice to mud to sheer vertical surfaces, while simultaneously channeling 5,000 horsepower to all 4 wheels.
They're down there too.
Button C releases rotary saw blades from the front of the car, capable of cutting through trees, obstructions, or anything else standing between Speed and the finish line. Button D activates the deflector, a bulletproof, crash-proof shield that seals the cockpit completely, making the driver effectively invulnerable inside. Button E controls the special illumination system, an enhanced set of headlights that can be swiveled and extended far beyond the range of ordinary lights, with infrared capability when used with Speed's helmet. In later episodes, Pops modified this button to also deploy small wings beneath the car, allowing the Mach 5 to make extraordinary aerial jumps. Button F is Frogger mode, a full underwater configuration that seals the cockpit, supplies it with oxygen from a 100-pound reserve tank capable of lasting 30 minutes, raises a periscope, and feeds a camera view to a screen inside the cabin. And Button G releases the homing robot, a mechanical gull-shaped flying device that can carry messages, photographs, recorded audio, and even small objects operated by remote control from inside the cockpit. The H button, located on the center console rather than the steering wheel, sends the homing robot back to its home base. No other car on the racing circuit can do any of this. Nobody else has anything close. And the villains of the show spend a remarkable amount of energy trying to steal it, destroy it, replicate it, or find a way around it, which tells you everything about how central the Mach 5 is to the entire premise.
Worried about the time for the race. It's supposed to start very soon after all. But don't worry, Speed, the race is going to be...
The story begins, the great plan and the first races. The series opens with Speed already in the orbit of competitive racing, but not yet established at the top level. Pops is protective and demanding. He tells Speed he isn't ready for the big races, that he needs more experience, and that the world of professional racing is more dangerous and more corrupt than Speed understands. Speed, of course, doesn't fully listen. The very first episode, The Great Plan, sets the formula the show would follow for 52 episodes. There is a race. Inside or around that race, there is a criminal scheme. Corrupt sponsors, dangerous saboteurs, villains using the racing circuit as cover for something far worse. Speed finds himself in the middle of it. The Mach 5's gadgets become the tools of survival. And somewhere in the background, watching, is Racer X. From those opening episodes, certain patterns solidify. Speed is not simply a racing driver. He is, almost accidentally, a crime fighter. The races in this world are infiltrated by industrial spies, corporate crooks, smugglers, assassins, and shadowy organizations whose names change from episode to episode, but whose contempt for fair competition stays constant. Pops builds the cars. Sparky fixes them. Trixie watches from above. Spritle and Chim Chim cause trouble from the trunk. And Racer X drifts in and out, always present when things turn most dangerous, always gone before anyone can ask the questions that matter. In The Secret Engine, one of the early standout episodes, Speed finds himself racing against a driver who has hidden a stolen engine inside a racing car, an engine so powerful and so illegal that the race has become a cover for something far darker than a competition. The mystery of the engine and the people behind it pulls Speed into danger well beyond the racetrack. The Mach 5's gadgets are deployed in ways that show the audience exactly what this car can do when the stakes are real.
300 miles to go before we reach Monte Carlo. If we get there safely and without being disqualified, we'll be...
Racer X and the weight of the secret. No element of Speed. Racer carries more emotional weight than the identity of Racer X, and the show handles it in a way that is quite sophisticated for a children's animated series from 1967. The audience knows from early on what Speed does not. Racer X is Rex Racer. He left home years before the series began, when he was 18, the same age Speed is now. The circumstances of his departure are shown in flashbacks across several episodes. Rex had his first race as a professional driver at Sunny Downs track, and with less than 1 lap to go, he was leading. Pops had told him he wasn't ready, that his technique still needed work. Rex didn't listen, pushed too hard in the final laps, lost control of the car, and crashed. Pops, who had poured years into building that car, exploded with anger, berated Rex, and in the heat of the moment said things that cut too deep. Rex, unable to accept that verdict, made a decision. He would leave, and he would not come back until he had become the greatest race car driver in the world. He did not come back, not as Rex. Instead, he became Racer X, masked, numbered 9, a reference to his role as an international agent, identified as Agent 9, and operating in the shadows of the racing world as both a competitor and a spy working against the criminal organizations that infest it. He knows who Speed is, he watches Speed race, he makes choices again and again to sacrifice his own race position to protect Speed from danger that Speed doesn't even know is coming.
Speed is the hero of the entire racing world. And now for some terrible news.
The episode Challenge of the Masked Racer is among the most important in the series. It is the first time the audience sees the face of Racer X, and the first time the show allows Speed to get close enough to ask the question directly. But Racer X will not answer. He protects Speed, as he always does. He walks away, as he always does. And Speed is left with a mask on the ground beside him and a suspicion that will never quite become certainty. In the trick race, near the end of the series, the moment finally arrives. Speed directly asks Racer X, "Are you Rex? Are you my brother?" Racer X responds by punching Speed in the stomach, knocking him unconscious. While Speed lies on the ground, the leader of the car acrobatic team, having seen Rex's face briefly unmasked, makes the observation aloud. Yes, he is the brother. Racer X acknowledges it. But he cannot go home. He leaves his mask beside Speed's unconscious body, tells him he will always be watching, and walks away into a life as a full-time international secret agent, without a name or a country. Speed wakes up, finds the mask, and calls out for Rex. He is finally convinced of what he suspected, but Rex is already gone.
A bridge! A bridge under the water? Very strange. Never mind about that.
The races and the villains. What the show was really about. Across 52 episodes, the show gave American audiences villains they had never quite seen before in a cartoon, and races they had never imagined. Some of the most memorable storylines involved the car acrobatic team, a group of drivers whose precision formation racing doubled as a weapon. The mammoth car, from one of the series' most celebrated episodes, was a 600-foot-long vehicle that resembled a moving road train, owned by gangster Cruncher Block. The setup had everyone, including Speed and Inspector Detector, believing it was smuggling $50 million in stolen gold as cargo. The twist was something else entirely. The mammoth car wasn't carrying the gold. It was built out of it. The entire body of the vehicle was constructed from the stolen gold bars, melted and molded into the car's frame. Speed had to find a way to stop something that couldn't simply be outrun. And in the end, it was Spritle and Chim Chim, stowed away as usual, who caused the car to crash and melt into a pool of gold at an oil refinery. The Most Dangerous Race was the show's only 3-part episode, a signal that what was inside it was too large for a single installment. It sent Speed into the kind of danger that the show's creators knew required more room to breathe. Throughout the series, the villains shared a characteristic. They used racing as a cover. The track was always only the surface. Underneath it were stolen weapons, smuggled cargo, industrial espionage, assassination plots, and organizations with names that sounded like they belonged to James Bond films, because, in a sense, they did. Tatsuo Yoshida had borrowed from Goldfinger in building this world, and the show never forgot its debt to that tradition. Speed, for his part, never simply raced to win. He raced because winning was the point, yes, but also because the race was always connected to something that needed to be stopped. The Mach 5's gadgets were not entertainment features. They were survival tools. Button C cut through obstacles placed deliberately to cause crashes. Button D saved Speed's life when assassins fired at the car. Button F allowed the Mach 5 to escape underwater when there was no other way out. The car was built for a world where races were not clean competitions, but arenas where criminal forces played for much higher stakes.
They're too noisy.
Pops and the family at the heart of it. It is easy to watch Speed Racer as a show about a car and its driver, but the show's emotional center is really a family, and the things families don't say to each other. Pop's Racer drove one son away by being too hard, too angry, too proud to separate his feelings about a destroyed car from his love for the boy driving it. He never forgave himself for it, though the show lets that grief live mostly in silences. In the moments when Pops watches Racer X race and says almost to himself that Racer X is the greatest driver he has ever seen. He doesn't know that's Rex, but there is something in him that responds to that driver in a way that goes beyond admiration. The audience feels the gap between those two things, what Pops suspects and what Pops knows. And it is one of the quiet, genuinely moving elements of a show that could easily have been only about car chases and gadget buttons.
I wonder why they tried to stop that man from bringing serum to your brother, Maria.
So do I.
Someone doesn't want him to recover. Can you remember?
With Speed, Pops tries to thread a needle that he missed with Rex. He is protective, sometimes to the point of overprotection. He tells Speed he isn't ready for races that Speed then enters and wins anyway. He worries constantly. He builds the Mach 5 with every refinement he can imagine, because the car is how Pops shows love, by making the machine that carries his son as safe and capable as he can possibly make it. When Pops gives Speed the Mach 5, he is giving him everything he has. Mom Racer is quieter in the background, steady, warm, the person in the household who absorbs the heat that Pops generates and the excitement that Speed and Spritle bring through the door. She is the constant, and Spritle, for all his candy-driven mischief, is the pulse of the family's humor. The show understood that without him and Chim Chim, the weight of the Racer X storyline and the relentless parade of villains would become genuinely heavy. The two of them provide the release valve. The legacy and what it left behind. By the time the 52 episodes had aired across both Japan and the United States in 1967 and 1968, Speed Racer had done something that very few animated series of its era accomplished. It had built a world with emotional depth, recurring mysteries, and a central question, who is Racer X, and will the family ever be whole again, that kept audiences engaged across an entire run. In America, the show entered syndication and ran for years. It was still airing in reruns through the 1970s and into the 1980s, introducing new generations of kids to the Mach 5 and the mystery of the masked driver. Saturday morning television in America during that era had a lot of cartoons. Speed Racer was the one people remembered, not just fondly, specifically. They remembered the buttons. They remembered the voice of Racer X. They remembered the trunk and the chimp and the candy. In the 1990s, Cartoon Network brought it back to a new audience. By then, the word anime had entered the American vocabulary. But Speed Racer had been there first, long before most Americans knew what to call it. The franchise never truly stopped. In 1997, Tatsunoko produced a modernized remake of the series in Japan. A New Adventures of Speed Racer animated series had aired in America in the early 1990s. The show had become one of those cultural fixtures that didn't require explanation. You either knew it or you wished you did. In 2008, the Wachowski siblings, directors of The Matrix, brought Speed Racer to live-action film. They kept the core intact. Speed, the Mach 5, Trixie, Pops, Spritle, and Chim Chim, Racer X, and his secret identity. The film was visually extraordinary, saturated with color in a way that paid direct tribute to the original anime's hyper-vivid style. It was not a commercial success at the time, but the years since have been kind to it, and a dedicated audience now regards it as exactly what it was, a deeply faithful love letter to the original.
And if you think of anything we can do, we'll be glad to help.
Thank you, Speed.
Bringing it all together. Speed Racer was a show about a car. It was a show about racing. But if you sit with it long enough, it is really a show about a family that broke apart and spent 52 episodes trying, without quite saying so, to find its way back together. Rex Racer left because a father's pride got in the way of a father's love, and because a son's pride wouldn't let him hear what the criticism underneath the anger was actually saying. Speed Racer races partly because he loves it and partly because racing is the thing that connects him to a brother he barely remembers and a legacy he feels compelled to live up to. Pops builds cars because it is the only language he fully speaks, and the Mach 5 is his apology to Rex and his promise to Speed, expressed in steel and hydraulics and 7-lettered buttons. Racer X watches all of this from behind a mask and a number 9, sacrificing races, sacrificing recognition.
Field and fought it out nip and tuck for the lead. At times it was a dead heat as those two champion drivers, Speed Racer and Racer...
Sacrificing the chance to simply go home because he made a vow to himself on the side of a road when he was 18 years old, and he has never figured out how to walk back from it. That is the whole story. A boy, a car, a family, and a brother who never stopped watching from the shadows. All of it wrapped in one of the most recognizable theme songs ever to come out of a television set. If you grew up with Speed Racer, you already knew most of that, but sometimes it helps to hear the whole story laid out, to remember not just the races and the gadgets, but the people behind them, and what they were all really racing toward. It's a show that earned its place in the memory of everyone who watched it, and it did so not with a single unforgettable moment, but with 52 episodes of the same family showing up, race after race, for each other. That is something worth remembering. If this brought back something you hadn't thought about in a while, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more of this kind of storytelling ahead, and we'd love to have you along for the ride.